We're talking actors and directors who put on the shows.
We're talking playwrights and designers who you'll want to know.
From the very first rehearsal to the final curtain call.
We might be off Broadway, but we're talking about it all.
'Cause we're two local gals
With global pals, it's everything, everything, everything theater.
with Benita
And Ellen. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Everything Theater Podcast Backstage episode. And it's spooky time. We're in Halloween week. I'm Ellen Cribbs.
And I'm Benita Zahn. I just realized you're wearing your spooky shirt.
Yes, I've got my Ghosts and Bats shirt that I wear once a year already.
Someplace, and I may even have it. I look in the drawer here next to me. I have my funky glasses that I'll wear sometimes. That in a weird hat to answer the door, and the kids are like, or else I like to answer the door, and the kids will stand there, and I go trick or treat, and they're like,
That's my line.
"Oh, Halloween."
Well, before we jump into our spooky episode, and it's actually a perfect segue, as you'll see in a second, I want to let everyone know we're sponsored by Playhouse Stage Company. In their 35th anniversary season, they are doing Assassins. And if you haven't caught it yet, it's had rave reviews. I saw it this past weekend. Benita, you were wonderful. The cast is amazing. The performance is great. They run until the 30th. So you've got this weekend is the last chance you have to go check it out. You can get tickets at playhousestage.org.
And we're fond of saying it's a killer.
Ooh, yes.
But yeah, the houses have been great, so please come see it. It's as every bit as timely as when Sondheim wrote it. It's the musical he feels is his most perfect musical, the music in it. And it's so you judge for yourself. Come and see us.
I love it.
And the reason it's appropriate we start talking about that is because it's at the Cahoe's Music Hall, and we're talking about haunted theaters. And the Cahoe's Music Hall, by all accounts, is.
Yes. Do you want to tell us a little about the history of Cahoe's? Because you've worked there. And have you had any experiences there?
I'm not sure. But I am very aware of Ava Tanquay, who is the ghost at the music hall. Although some have said there are other ghosts, and it's not Ava. She performed on the music hall stage for several times with good reviews. And apparently, according to the Olean Democrat newspaper, dated October 30, 1894, her most well-known and popular song was "I Don't Care," a tribute to her jovial and boundary-pushing personality. She was a vaudevillian, and the belief is that she haunts the music hall, and that when you perform there, you need to bring her chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
And trust me, whenever I've performed there, I have checked with directors, producers, did you bring Eva her chocolate? Because you don't want to, you don't want to mess with any of this.
Yeah. And John, our first person, was saying that wrote in, says Cahoe's Music Hall is reported to be the home of the ghost of Ava Tanguay, a vaudeville actress who performed there many times during the vaudeville days. One night, a friend of John's was alone in the music hall and was heading to the dressing rooms. They are along a hallway that runs behind and slightly below the stage, with exits at either end of the hallway. As he entered from one end of the hallway, he glimpsed a woman in Victorian dress exiting the door at the other end of the hallway. As stated, there was no one else in the theater.
And supposedly, because, as the legend has it, Cahoe's always held such a special place in her heart, she just couldn't stay away, even after death. And that's the hallway where the dressing rooms are. So,
So she was there. She knows it.
I'm not arguing. You know what you've seen. So
Yeah.
That's clearly an interesting one. Joan says she was an education director at the Rialto Square Theater in Joliet, Illinois. and it was said that there are resident ghosts there. And she never saw or heard any, but there were many times she was there late at night, and there are numerous YouTube videos exploring the legend. And we should point out, anybody who has worked in a theater knows about a ghost light, which is the one light that stays on stage all the time. And it's both a safety feature and also a means to appease any spirits that may inhabit the space.
Have you ever felt very unsettled walking into a theater with a ghost light on? I always get a sense of ickiness.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, we've got a load of, I used to perform quite a lot up at the Fort Salem Theater. And now, Kyle West and Jared are there and own it. But before them, Jay Kerr owned the theater. And for many years prior to Jay taking it over, the Beavers had it. So when Jay bought the theater, he did a lot of renovation. And when I got up there, he had already done over a small area he was using for cabaret. And he said, come take a look at the main stage area. And as I went you walk up a few steps to go in, I stopped. I went, oh, I can't go in here. They're checking me out.
Ooh.
He knew of, and I could feel the spirits. And they had to vet me before I could walk into the theater. Fast forward a few years, and I'm singing there. The singing anchors, Jerry Gretzinger, Jess Layton, and myself. Jerry claims to have never sensed anything, but both Jess and I felt warmth walking from the dressing room through the bomb, if you will, onto the stage. So
maybe they accepted you.
And Jared and Kyle say they have not had an experience. So my contention is they were waiting for those guys, whatever, or they were just sort of done with the place. But I definitely, and I don't mean to speak for Jessica, but we both experienced that there.
Oh.
And we love performing there. Don't get me wrong. Love it.
Let's see. Ryan says the building Confetti uses is super haunted. The Albany Masonic Building is, to my knowledge, built on the old Fort Orange gallows. And this is my little experience that I had was at the Albany Masonic Temple. I was directing Servant of Two Masters last summer, and that building just it gives you the creeps late at night. And if you're there alone, I mean, there are human skeletons in the building. There's all sorts of things in there. And we were in the basement. We had finished up rehearsal. It was me and the one other actor that was walking out with me. And everybody else was gone. The whole building was empty. We went to turn off the lights downstairs, and there's a whole bunch of kind of like chandelier-like lights in the basement. Turn off the lights, and they then did this crazy pattern of turning off and on and off and on. And it went on for about 3 minutes. Just the lights randomly popping on, going off, popping on over here, going off. And they just were doing this whole dance. And then everything went off and one little light stayed on. And we couldn't figure out how to get it off.
What did you do in that time?
Basically froze. It was very creepy. I mean, I'm sure it probably is an electrical thing, but still, I thought, who knows? This building has such a rich history that all sorts of people walk through here. It's very old. Maybe it's the ghost saying hi.
They're putting on a show for you.
Exactly.
They knew you could appreciate a good show.
And then we hightailed it out of there. We were both so spooked from that.
I'm not sure I would have gone back.
Yeah.
Laura says doing a colonial theater piece at the Tenbrook Mansion, there was a side room that we were using as a dressing room. And after the show one night, she went to change and noticed it was much darker than we'd left it because a large shape was blocking the window inside. When I stepped in, I saw a man in older looking clothes, thinking it was another actor. I apologized and stepped out. It was then I realized I didn't recognize him as anyone in the show. I looked back and he had vanished, and the room had returned to its normal level of din. She changed in the car instead.
Yeah. I know
I, yeah, I would have as well. I'd have been out of there so fast.
I know they do ghost tours at Ten Brook, and I've heard numerous people say that some weird stuff happened.
Crazy, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Wesley says, I'm not an expert, but when I worked at the Niederlander Theater, formerly Iroquois Theater, that had one of the deadliest fires in history, ghost tours. Ghost tours would walk by the stage door all the time telling stories. I never saw anything exactly, but multiple times when I'd be closing up and no one else was in the building, the elevators down to the basement level would open on their own. Faulty elevator or former patrons trying to get our attention? You tell me.
Oh,
And this is the quick history because I remember this from Chicago, going on tours. They would talk about this specific place. So the theater was built in 1903 and cost millions of dollars. And in 1903, it was $1 million, which now is about $30 million. So you know how much this cost. And the newspapers, this is very much like the Titanic. They said it was fireproof, which is just
yeah.
recipe for disaster to say that. The theater was showing Mr. Bluebeard on December 30th. All 1,724 seats were filled, plus there were a few hundred tickets that sold for people to stand. Midway through the showing, a stage light sparked. The spark flew onto the backdrops, which were extremely flammable. The backdrops were on fire. People were rushing out of the seats. The exits of the theater were not labeled. Plus, the doors had used what is called a bascule lock, and they were popular in Europe, but not in Chicago. So people couldn't figure out how to unlock the doors to escape. Several people went to the fire escape. However, they were frozen and would not lower down. So the fire lasted only 30 minutes, but over 600 people lost their lives. And due to the flames and people jumping off the fire escapes to their deaths, the alley outside is called the Alley of Death. And if you walk in that alley, you may notice a chilly breeze on a warm day, or you may even hear someone whisper your name when you enter the alley. And some people report the feeling of hands on their shoulders.
Ooh, we needed sound effects for this program, this
We,
podcast.
we do.
Wow. You know, hey, I believe. I mean, Victoria says, when I was still at Sage, I designed lights for productions that rented out our black box theater, the Meter Little Theater, if you're familiar with it. One time she was finishing up programming some cues when the actors, all young kids, left to eat lunch with their teacher. The God mic was left on, and I heard little footsteps running around the stage, so I figured some kids had stayed behind to paint set pieces. I looked down and there were no kids. And the director later told me she'd locked the doors after the kids left. So she was alone when she heard those footsteps. Another time, same theater, a director asked me if I'd been there late the previous night. He told me he'd seen a lady walking around in the wings while he was building set pieces. He didn't get a good look at her face, but she was wearing white and her long dark hair was down. As I said no, I'd gone home for the night and asked if there was another one of the crew members. He said no. He was there alone that night and the building was locked. Turns out the night he'd seen her was the 100th anniversary of the death of Russell Sage's founder, Margaret Olivia Slocum Sage. She says, I guess she was tricking up on him.
Yeah. Oh, it just sends shivers down my spine hearing that.
Right? And you know, I'm on the board now at Sage. I'm going to have to bring that up at the next board meeting.
Oh, yes.
And say, anybody know?
Yeah. Rebecca, this is someone I went to college with, said, I have one from our alma mater. I forgot the name of the ghost at Ithaca College. Maybe it was Peter. He was supposedly a student who had passed away many years ago. Anyway, I had my own experience with him before I'd even heard of him. I was running the spotlight for Deflator Mouse, and the first act had started, and I could hear someone walking with keys in the catwalks above me. There were usually people up there before the show doing whatever it is they need to do. So at first, I thought someone was checking something out or something, or got caught up there when the show started. but eventually it became distracting and unnerving, this constant key jiggling. And I spoke into my headset asking if anyone was up there because they were making a lot of noise. I was radioed back that no one was up there. I insisted that I heard someone and that they were distracting. So someone went to check it out, and sure enough, no one was up there. And once someone checked, the sound stopped. I was so creeped out and struggled my way through the opera that night, thinking someone might come down from above or something. No one ever did. But when I told people about it afterward, that's when I learned about Peter. I was told it was definitely Peter. He died in a car crash. Keys are his thing. Apparently, he's been haunting the theater for years.
Wow. You know, I'm an Oswego grad, and I worked radio there as well. There was a non-commercial FM station on campus, and there had been talk that somebody had died there when they were constructing the building.
Mm.
There were a number of stories about experiences, you know, a cold, you know, a shadow across the soundboard, a cold feeling. And one night I was in there working late. I worked at midnight to 2 a.m. progressive rock and jazz show. You know, hi, I'm Benita. Put your feet up and spend the night with me. Yeah, yeah. Yes. So I called security a number of times to walk me home because the guys at the water treatment plant used to call in, and you never knew if, you know, one of those fellas was gonna, and no offense to them, they're gonna find you on the way home. And I called security one night because I'd had an interesting phone call. And it was a two-stage process. You would turn off the transmitter and you had to wait, I think, 5 minutes. Now it's all quick, for the second shutdown. And I'm in there with campus security, and we hear a door close and footsteps walk up a hallway. And he said to me, so I guess you had company tonight. I said, there was no one here. And we look out in the hallway and there's nobody there. He looks at me, I look at him, and I'm like, we're out of here.
Oof. Oh.
And yes, I did go back and work another shift, but oh yeah. So I think I was in touch with that spirit. Anyway, Stephen says, not exactly a theater ghost, but the night Oakley Hall III, who was the artistic director at Lexington Conservatory Theater in Greene County, which later morphed into Capitol Rep, died, the central glass globe of the homemade wagon wheel chandelier in the kitchen of our Catskill home unexpectedly shattered. Hadia, Oakley's girlfriend at the time of his death, told us, yep, it was definitely him messing with you. He was a formative influence for me. We probably wouldn't be in Catskill running Bridge Street Theater if it hadn't been for the summer I spent up in the mountain working with him. We later had a memorial gathering of many of the old company up at the Lexington site, followed by a wake back at our place, and some of his ashes were spread at both locations. And that's Stephen Patterson who tells that story. And I knew of Oakley Hall. I don't believe I'd ever met him. I met some of the others from the original group from Lexington Conservatory as they launched Capitol Rep. And I'll bet you, well, you know, that was an old supermarket, so maybe that wasn't haunted, but I'm wondering about the new facility. It was a bakery. They did, you know, commercial baking in there.
I think, you know, we'll have to check with Maggie Mancinelli Cahill because I think she does have a ghost story from the old space that she put on Facebook once.
Well, Maggie, after you hear the podcast, let us know. We'll share the story.
Yeah. Azia JJ says, working at Fort Salem. There you go, Benita. You've worked there. Working there in my 20s, we were told the theater was haunted, but I never saw anything. Then one night during a run of Brigadoon, me and two other actors were walking outside to make our entrance. Yes, outside and into the basement to climb a ladder to a trap door. When a ghost of a small child emerged in a white dress, looked at us and said, "Hi there." We froze, unable to speak. Then we heard, "Lisa, where are you?" "Coming, Mommy." Note, lock the doors of your theater so 3 actors in their 20s recovering from a hangover don't freak out.
You know, listen, I got to tell you, to this day, I won't go up where the costumes are stored at Fort Salem. I had a vibe years ago there, and I said, I don't need to mess with it. you know, when you get the vibe.
You
So
do.
it's fun, you know, and it's not just up here. There are theaters in New York City that are, let me see if I can pull that back up. I had, here we go. No, that's not Broadway Ghosts. Broadway Ghosts. So they say the Palace at 1564 7th Avenue, built in 1903, one of the oldest running theaters on Broadway, and it hosts its fair share of musicals, plays, and tragedy. Legend has it in the 50s, acrobat Louis Borsellino would attempt to tightrope walk without a net, and he fell to his death.
Oh.
To some dispute this claim, saying he was only badly injured. Stagehands and actors believe his ghost still has a taste for the stage, and therefore Borsellino can be seen swinging from the rafters when the theater is empty. And like any good Broadway ghost, to let out a shriek of terror before reenacting his ill-fated final act over and over again.
Ooh.
The New Amsterdam is supposedly haunted. It was revived by Disney in the mid-90s. And it's got a couple of ghosts. The Lyceum, that is it's very old theater. Let's see, landmark status, oldest continuing theater on Broadway.
Oh.
And it has a permanent phantom in the form of legendary choreographer Bob Fosse. The Imperial, opened in 1923. Billy Elliot played there. And young girls in the show claimed their dressing room was haunted by a strange and powerful entity who would open and close doors at will. And they named him Fred. The Belasco, built in 1907. It's only the 6th oldest on Broadway. David Belasco died in 31 and became one of the Broadway ghosts. He said to watch rehearsals and walk the halls whenever he pleases. Some crew members at the theater will say, "Good night, Mr. Belasco," at the end of each night, just to appease his ghost. Do you love it?
I love it.
You know, so believe it or not, it's fun. You know, just the stories are great. And it's theater.
It is. Even in their death, ghosts are theatrical.
You know, Ellen, if you came, if you will, face to face, like JJ says he did with a ghost at the theater, would you go back?
Oh, depends on the show. I don't know, maybe not. That stuff really freaks me out.
Yeah. It's creepy. But I think also there's sort of, I think, I'll call it a warmness, a through line that so many performers have experienced something like this.
Yeah.
So is it just our rich imaginations?
Yeah. I don't know. And I think of the poor people on wardrobe crew who they're usually the last ones out of the building because they have to wait for actors to get changed, and then they have to wash the clothes and wait to move them into the dryer. So they're usually there all hours of the night. And I know some friends who have worked wardrobe crew who have heard some creepy stuff at night when they're alone in the theater.
Can you share one of the stories?
Yeah, I know someone who could have sworn she heard a door open and close, and she was alone in there and had to walk around the whole theater, and there was nobody there, but she's like, there definitely was a door that opened somewhere in this space.
Well, we've opened the door to your imagination as we approach Halloween. And the next time you're at the theater, if something just odd happens, maybe tip your hat, acknowledge that maybe it's a ghost. You know, what is that? Good night, Mr. Velasco. Before we head out, you've got one more reminder about Assassins.
Yes, so Assassin's last chance to check out this beautiful production. It's dark, humorous, and thought-provoking. It explores the darker side of the American experience through the deeds of 9 would-be presidential assassins. And as I said, Benita, you could have a career. You should dress up as Emma Goldman for Halloween.
Someone said to me, "Oh, when Tova Feltrue leaves Funny Girl, you should take over the role as Mama Bryce." I went, I think I'm gonna look into that. I'll give him a holler.
Yes.
But anyway, thank you all so much for spending time with us. If you do go see Assassins, or when you make you book your tickets, let them know you found out about it by listening to us here at Everything Theater. I'm Benita Zahn. Thanks for joining us.
And I'm Ellen Cribbs. Have a happy Halloween. We'll catch you next time. Thank you so much for listening to the Everything Theater podcast. Special thanks goes out to Alice Grinling for our photography and Justin Friello for composing our amazing theme song. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you want to share your thoughts or what's going on in your theater community, you can reach out to us on social media or through our email at everythingtheaterpodcast@gmail.com. Till next time, it's everything, everything, everything.